On September 19, 2008, Blink-182 drummer Travis Barker boarded a private jet in South Carolina, headed to California. The small jet, built for 8, comfortably fit 4 men and 2 pilots on what should have been a routine flight. Travis was supposed to be flying with his wife, Shanna, but at the last minute, something in Shanna's gut told her to stay behind, just in case something happened. So Travis said goodbye to his wife and boarded the plane himself. But during takeoff, something went terribly wrong. Travis heard a loud noise, which he said sounded like someone shooting a gun next to his head. The plane spiraled out of control. It alternated between rising up in the air and smashing against the ground. Finally, just beyond the airport, the plane crashed. So how do plane crashes occur? What happens to the passengers? And how can you survive if the plane you're in goes down? Today we're breaking down what really happens to you during a plane crash. Despite never fully leaving the ground, Travis's crash was actually more common than you'd think. Research shows that the most dangerous parts of a flight are actually the shortest parts: takeoff and landing. These parts of the flight are only 6% of the average 90-minute flight, yet takeoff and landing are when a whopping 63% of fatal accidents occur. But why are these 2 small windows during a flight so dangerous? Professor Anthony Brickhouse, an expert from the Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, says pilots have less time to react if anything goes wrong during takeoff and landing because of how low the plane is to the ground. But when a plane is higher in the air and something goes wrong, it glides on the air instead of falling directly down to the ground. The higher altitude and the gliding effect both give a pilot more time to react and try to stop the plane from crashing. It's no guarantee that malfunctions at higher altitudes will result in a safer landing, but this is why less crashes occur at cruising altitude than during takeoff and landing. Now, let's look at what happened to our Blink-182 drummer Travis's plane. In this case, Travis was part of the 14% of accidents that occur during takeoff. Remember that loud noise he heard that sounded like gunshots? Well, that was actually the sound of the tires on the plane bursting. When the pilots realized the plane's tires had burst, they made a quick decision to abort the takeoff. However, they were going too fast, over 160 miles per hour. Our expert, Professor Brickhouse, explains that if the pilot is going to stop takeoff, they must do it at a slower speed. Otherwise, it will result in a crash. Which is exactly what happened to Travis's plane as it crashed through the fence around the airport. Travis and one other friend survived the crash, but tragically everyone else on board was killed on impact. Travis says that before impact, the plane was a ball of fire. He and his friend miraculously escaped by opening the plane's door and sliding down the wing. Travis survived, but suffered extreme burns on his body caused by leaking jet fuel. He had to spend 11 weeks in the hospital and undergo a total of 30 surgeries. After these intense treatments, Travis was able to make a full recovery. Thankfully, like Travis, 95% of people survive plane crashes. But also like Travis, even those lucky enough to survive a plane crash still have major injuries. Due to the severity and high speeds of a plane crash, survivors often experience broken bones, spinal cord damage, burns, disfigurements, and brain injuries. These injuries can be debilitating and prevent the survivor from working or living independently for the rest of their lives. On a 1995 flight from New Jersey to Colombia, a 6-year-old girl named Michelle Dusan was one of 4 survivors in a crash that killed 3 members of her family. The little girl was found half buried in the ground with major leg injuries. Although she was in a wheelchair for years after the accident, she incredibly learned to walk again, despite doctors saying she never would. No matter what physical injuries they sustain, plane crash survivors developed an increased risk of serious mental health side effects. Following his plane crash, Travis suffered survivor's guilt over the loss of his friends. He now struggles with severe PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. Travis once said he couldn't even walk down the street if he saw a plane overhead. And what about crashes that are fatal? What do those passengers experience? In most cases, passengers never even know they were in a crash. As we've discussed, pilots usually don't have much time to react during crashes. The same is also true for passengers. Crashes are usually quick and sudden. This means people don't have enough time to realize that the plane is crashing. The mind is only conscious for a moment, resulting in a rapid and relatively painless death. Despite the quick death, the crash victim's body is severely injured throughout. Speed, size, and sight of the crash can affect the severity of injuries. Typical plane crash injuries are extremely nasty, including fractured skulls, spines, ruptured hearts, dismemberment, disintegration, major lacerations, detachment of the skin, and being crushed. In August of 2023, an American Airlines flight dropped 20,000 feet in minutes as a result of a pressurization issue. Inside the cabin, the plane's passengers experienced a phenomenon known as depressurization. Depressurization occurs when the air pressure in a confined space drops, which can happen gradually or slowly. When a plane's air pressure drops below a certain level, oxygen masks automatically deploy. These masks provide oxygen for all passengers for up to 10 minutes. During this time, pilots descend the plane to at least 12,000 feet, where oxygen masks are no longer required. Passengers on board the American Airlines flight reported a burning smell, loud ear pops, and feeling dizzy and tired during the depressurization. In some instances of depressurization, passengers suffer from extreme condition known as hypoxia. Hypoxia occurs when a plane remains at a high altitude for too long and the body doesn't receive enough oxygen. Symptoms of hypoxia include fatigue, nausea, numbness, and a strange effect called cyanosis, a change in body tissue color to a purplish hue. The long-term effects of hypoxia can include dead tissue and even permanent brain damage due to a lack of oxygen. We've talked a lot about what happens to our bodies during a plane crash. But is there anything we can do to increase our chances of surviving if we're ever in a crash? Thankfully, there are a few things. One of the first things you can do is pick the right seat. A Time magazine study found that the middle seat in the back third of the plane had the lowest fatality rate in the event of a crash. Another great spot is within 5 rows of an emergency exit. Professor Ed Galea from the University of Greenwich found that out of 100 crash survivors in his study, most of them sat within 5 rows of an emergency exit. Any further away from the emergency exit than that, and odds of survival drop. Second, in the event of a crash, you'll want to brace for impact. This is meant to help reduce injuries or even increase chances of survival. To properly brace, it is recommended to lean forward, place your head close to the seat in front of you, and bend your limbs in towards you to keep them in place. The last thing you can do is remain in your seat and keep your seatbelt securely buckled at all times. In January of 2024, a video of an Alaskan Airlines Boeing 737 went viral and the aircraft lost a cabin wall mid-flight, creating a large hole in the plane. You probably saw this video circulating on the news and social media. The open hole in the side of the plane caused depressurization, and items were sucked out of the plane while still in flight. In this case, everyone survived because those who were near the hole were securely strapped into their seats. Some lost phones and shoes, but nobody lost their life. And in the event of depressurization, remember to put on your oxygen mask immediately. This can prevent the devastating hypoxia we talked about earlier. Finally, we come back to our drummer Travis to find out how things turned out for him after the crash. In 2021, with the help of his children and loved ones, Travis was finally able to conquer his PTSD and fly on a plane again. Despite everything we've talked about today, flying is still considered the safest method of transportation, with its 95% crash survival rate. So, next time you're getting on a plane to fly, remember to follow all the instructions from the flight crew. Stay in your seat, sit near an emergency exit, and use the oxygen masks immediately if they come down.